this is a little bit of a departure for me and draws from really like 20 plus years of doing this, like presenting marketing data to high level people in organizations. Sometimes they were clients, sometimes organizations I work for. I also have spent a lot of time building solutions for organizing and analyzing marketing data and understanding where that fits in. We're going to talk about it just in terms of the actual process of presenting. Where I want to start is just framing what we're talking about. So something that took me way too long to figure out is that most people don't want to see dashboards. I think coming from a kind of technology background, but also just the brain of an analytical person, you're like, look at this, you can put things on a screen and somebody can filter by date and interact with it and everything. Isn't that the coolest thing ever? And maybe it is the coolest thing ever, but it's not the coolest thing ever to the stakeholders that we're talking about. Really, that kind of presentation belongs more for doers. And I've certainly seen dashboards that were designed so that they're much more of like a slide deck or a static presentation. But what we think of as dashboards belongs in the doer realm. Then we have marketing leadership. We're also really not going to focus on marketing leadership today, but they're kind of exist in an in-between place. So this is like if you have spent time being like the person in charge of paid media or something, and you need to present to your boss, you're really, once again, moving away from the dashboard. What you want to be doing is providing summary data. What were our goals? Did we achieve them? Outlining the strategy you have so that you get buy-in and input. What we're going to focus on from here on out is what I'm calling the C level, but again, it's really leadership who are not marketers. And the most important thing that I want to convey is just that if you have a marketing brain, if you have an analytical bent on marketing, chances are you're gonna tend to present levels of detail that don't belong in a presentation to executive leadership. So this idea of storytelling slides, one-pagers, where you're really focusing on business impact and business opportunities and return on investment, and using the language that they understand in those things. So you're trying to decide, what are you going to talk about? What are you going to present? You have an opportunity. Maybe it's a quarterly meeting. Maybe it's you've done a big rollout of a new website or a marketing campaign. You're doing a wrap up of a holiday marketing campaign, something like that. If you have a time slot, you're probably going to be joining other people in a meeting. You're not the only person presenting. Maybe you're even helping somebody else present. Maybe you're not even the person doing the presenting yourself. So a couple of tips, and that's sort of how I would frame this. I'm not trying to do an encyclopedic review of presenting in general, but just tips related to specifically this task of presenting marketing data. There's a good chance that there are going to be people in the meeting that want more detail. Maybe they need to be convinced. Like you have a sense, this maybe because of the last meeting you're in or questions that you've received. So don't be afraid to reach out to people in advance. And you really can, just by listening to somebody and saying, yeah, we know it's hard to measure conversions from social media, but here's why it's important. And here are the things that we're measuring, and here's the metrics we're using. But it's not just an opportunity to lecture. You also want to listen to what are their objections, what's their point of view, so that hopefully in advance you can sort of diffuse somebody who might have come in and sabotaged the meeting, but certainly listening to what they have to say and making sure that you address it head on goes a long, long way. The 10-20-30 rule is something so one of my heroes of presenting is Guy Kawasaki, and I think he was the product evangelist at Apple, worked at Google. and now actually has a leadership role at Canva. This guy is really amazing. Look for his videos on YouTube. The 10-20-30 rule is 10 slides in 20 minutes, 30-point font. And breaking this down, like honestly, I don't really care about those numbers exactly. But the idea is that you want to think ahead, like how much time do I have and how much time am I going to need per slide? I've made this mistake so many times. Like I put down everything I need to say and it's 40 slides and I've got an hour to present. That's too much. I'm never going to make it through those slides, no matter what. And what you find yourself doing if you try is you're going to start rushing through and you're not doing anybody a service by that. You're going to look bad. You're not going to get across the points you want to get across. The 20 minutes, there's a lot of talk out there of how long can people pay attention, and it ranges from approximately as long as a goldfish, which is less than 15 seconds or something, to I've seen valid research that says actually it could be hours if you engage your audience the right way. Generally, people fall on the side of you've got 10 to 20 minutes to keep people's attention. And that's the principle that TED Talks are based on, is that idea that that's how long you really have where you're going to keep people engaged without reverting to extraordinary measures. So even if you have a longer time slot than that, leave the rest of the time for questions. Speaking of their priorities, this one's interesting. And this is one that I've been running into a lot recently on a specific topic. So I'm sure you and what you do have run it, like are getting questions or thinking about AI and how AI fits in terms of an opportunity to reach new audiences, its role in the buying funnel. And this is top of mind for a lot of people I talk to. When I'm sitting there looking at the data and I'm like, well, actually, I would rank this like, behind AOL in terms of traffic to your website. And not because AOL is something you should be looking into. And that's not completely true. I do think it's important, but it's really important to senior leadership in some of the organizations I work with. So we need to make sure that we address it head on, even if we don't think it's the most important thing. So moving on to, okay, so we've got a good outline. We start building out our slides. This money slide thing, this was a tip. So I used to work with this guy, Young Mean Song. I worked at Atlas, which had a buy-side advertising platform. They had helped develop a tool for managing search campaigns. They had bought our company, so I ended up working for them. Young was their head of analytics, and he was like, you always got to have the money slide. You got to have the one slide that it's just like boom, that the audience is like, that's the one. And he could tell if he'd succeeded because he's in it presenting at a conference or something, and the phones come out and people are taking pictures of the money slide. And you're like, hey, that's it. I got it right. So that's something you want to think about, that idea of what do you want people to take away. Provide context. I mean, I feel this way about presenting data no matter who you're presenting it to. I think this is a mistake I make it. Like this is something I have to keep reminding myself is I present a number and I'm like, look, we got, 10,000 visits last month. Isn't that great? Well, who knows? Maybe that's terrible. Maybe we got 40,000 a month before. So by itself, numbers mean nothing. And then, of course, there's the challenge of data collection accuracy and discrepancies. And what you present trends, you can say, yeah, there's reasons, privacy controls, things why we don't fully trust this number, but we're trending in the right direction. And people that have earned a position in leadership probably have the business experience where they get it. They're like, yeah, nothing, you can never know anything for sure, but we know things are moving in the right direction. Then the last point here, as you're building out your slides, is don't focus on numbers, don't focus on charts, focus on things that matter to the business. What are this year's business goals? What's the mission of the business? And tie what you're presenting to that. That goes a long, long way. I mean, one of the things that I found is that when I'm working with somebody and they're, again, especially if they're not in marketing, if they believe that I understand and care about the business, it's like a free pass. I get so much more leeway if the person I'm talking to believes that I understand the business and care about the business. There's an expression that exists out there. I don't know what it dates back to, but visualize success. I've seen it in the context of everything from business school advice to Buddhism. I'm turning that on his head and saying, okay, so you've put together your data, you're presenting. Now come at it from the point of view of assume you got something wrong and look for what it is. And certainly, especially when you feel like, yeah, this seems a little too good to be true. It probably is. And there are a lot of reasons. I've got on YouTube a workshop I did for specific things to look for, how to recognize them. I'll use a little anecdote to represent this and when this really dawned on me. I had this employee for a while who was she was really smart, lovely person to work with, and just the consummate optimist. She had such a positive attitude about everything. And what I found is she was really not good at solving analytics problems because she just would tend to have this mindset of, yeah, it looks great. And you have to come at it with this attitude. I don't trust it. If any of you was an X-Files fan back in the day, the trust no one mantra. Like, so trust no data. There's probably something wrong with it. You've just got to figure out what it is. If you're sitting in front of people that may not know marketing, but they know how to look at numbers, they're going to spot it if you put something in there that just doesn't seems too good to be true. Then we come around to delivering your slides. The one thing that I like to do is, because that idea of trying to minimum of 2 minutes per slide, I should say. There's always more data I want. I expect that there's going to be people that I'm presenting to that want more detail. It's fine to have it. Just say yes. And when we send out the slides, we'll be sending a spreadsheet that has details from this campaign. Chances are, honestly, people will generally not look at it, but they feel comforted by the fact that there is real detailed data, and will run into people that actually want to see the details. So think about it that way. You've got two deliverables. One is what you're presenting, and the other is supporting material. You can also just say, if you would like supporting material, I'm happy to get that to you. You don't necessarily need to think about every possible thing somebody's going to want to see. And then last, this is always true for any time you're presenting in front of anybody. If you get asked a question and the answer doesn't come to you right away, say, that's a great question. Let me look into it and get back to you. I want to make sure I get it right. And people will nearly always be forgiving of that.